Hello and welcome to the first night of Sonic and Iconic, our week-long virtual art gallery. I'm Joe Kleon with my good friend
Anastasia Pantsios.
And thank you so much for hanging out and live streaming. We've got a ton of photos for you to check out this week, over 1,100 photos. And they're going to be categorized with a different live stream, a different set of photos each night. And tonight we are showcasing
classic superstars, all of the great superstars that you remember from back in the day, many of whom are still out there hitting the road now, or will be when the pandemic is over.
And give them a few examples of some of the classic superstars artists we're going to feature.
Well, we got Aretha Franklin, we've got Tina Turner, we've got Bruce Springsteen, we've got U2. Who else, Joe?
Oh, geez. I'm not sure.
Got to look at your list. Huh?
I do have to look at my list.
David Bowie, Chuck Berry.
Yeah, David Bowie, Chuck Berry, Billy Joel. Anyone who really is just one of the, upper echelon of classic superstars. Cher, a lot of popular singer-songwriters like Neil Diamond, Elton John. Just a really big group of photos that we're going to show you. And then coming up later on this week, maybe we should plug a few of our things coming up.
Absolutely.
Tomorrow we'll be featuring country with an interview with
Gabe Pollock of the Bop Stop. They don't do country, but he'll be talking to us about what's going on with the live music scene and how the Bop Stop is currently hosting state-of-the-art streams in addition to limited capacity shows.
And Wednesday, it will be an entire evening of Michael Stanley, Cleveland's favorite son. We're going to have a ton of Michael Stanley photos, since Anastasia and I have shot him pretty much throughout his entire career.
Starting in 1974, yes.
So we have photos from 1974 up through last year. So every year of his career, pretty much, we will have photos. And it will also be the first night of our live stream of Michael Stanley's oral history. We recorded a two-part oral history with Michael. The first one was in 2013, back at my solo art gallery called Decade of Decibels at Space Rock over there on Waterloo next to the Beachland. And we recorded part 2 last year at Anastasia and I's Raining Rock Gallery at 78th Street. It's about 3.5 hours long, and the two parts put together. First part's an hour and a half. I think the second part is 2 hours, hosted by David Spiro. And Michael pretty much goes through all aspects of his career. Some really great, entertaining stories. A big Michael Stanley fan like myself, there was stuff that I had never heard before and stuff that I didn't know. So it's chock full of really good information, lots of great photos, funny stories, and it's definitely a must to check out if you are a Michael Stanley fan. Thursday, we'll be doing metal with all kinds of heavy metal, including bands like Machine Head and Merciful Fate and Motorhead and
Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Ozzy Osbourne, name it. All the big stars,
So you can crank that one up and piss off some of your neighbors. On Friday, we'll be doing pop with all the great pop artists, such as, newer artists like Justin Bieber and Taylor Swift and Katy Perry, and then older artists that you've shot, Anastasia.
Some of the artists from the 80s, because it's pop alternative, so we're going to be doing people like Depeche Mode and the Eurythmics, Iron Maiden.
Yeah, they have some good pop tunes.
Iron Maiden.
One of Anastasia's favorite pop artists, Leif Garrett.
Yeah, Leif Garrett's going to be.
She still has a crush on him,
Yeah, oh yeah. Right.
And then also that category, that's not nice. That category also will have hip hop, and we'll have some stuff of Snoop Dogg, Lil Wayne, Jay-Z, Tech Nine, and a bunch of the hip hop artists. So pop alternative and hip hop, that is on Friday. On Saturday, our biggest category, rock, which just has hundreds and hundreds of photos. Stuff from the early 70s all the way up through last year. I mean, Rush and AC/DC and just tons and tons of rock artists. So pretty much everybody you can imagine we've shot as far as rock artists go.
Pretty much true.
And then Sunday, we wrap up with something we call Cleveland Connected. And this is going to be a set of photos featuring anybody that's connected with Cleveland. They don't necessarily have to be from Cleveland or live in Cleveland, but artists that have a special connection with the Cleveland artists, with the Cleveland market. People like Joe Walsh, The Pretenders, Devo, Tim Ripper Owens, anybody like that that's connected with our Northeastern Ohio area, we will feature on Cleveland Connected.
Including Joe's favorite, Marilyn Manson.
Love Marilyn Manson, yes. We'll have at least one photo of him, so.
Yeah.
maybe not if I delete them.
But that category will also include people that never made it nationally, people that were just, locally popular. People like, say, First Light or The Adults. So you might find that band you used to go see in a local club that were really special to you. that maybe you'd forgotten about and people have forgotten about, but we're going to have them.
And a lot of Cleveland metal, too, because we both shot a lot of Cleveland metal.
Yeah, a lot of Destructor.
Yeah, Destructor and Breaker and Black Death and, all those
Black
Cleveland
Death,
metal bands.
The most photogenic Cleveland band ever. You put Sicky in front of a camera, he's like God.
So that is our lineup, and you can find all this information at Sonic and Iconic, the Facebook page for Sonic and Iconic. You can also link there from my website, joekleon.com. So right now we're going to begin our slideshow of classic superstars, and we're going to get our ugly mugs off the screen and just put the pictures on the full screen so you can actually watch without, getting sick to your stomach. And we'll have the classic superstars here now, and there'll also be information on where you can order these photos because they are available. Every photo is available for sale, and at any size that you would want. So we have multiple sizes available as well. So just check out the screen for that information, and that purchase information also will be on the Sonic and Iconic Facebook pages. So here we go.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go with our slideshow of classic superstars. And of course, we will start off with, we're going in alphabetical order, and it's just fitting because we'll start off with one of the most iconic classic superstars ever. Some great photos you took here, Anastasia. Why don't you talk a little bit about this amazing performer?
Well, Aretha Franklin is probably known to people as the greatest soul singer of all time, and she performed at Playhouse Square. I believe it was at the Palace Theater. And, of course, her iconic voice, blew everybody away. But she really shocked everybody when she pulled off the skirt she was wearing, and she's in a little tank suit, which, she's not known for, body over voice like Britney Spears. So, she didn't look bad, but I think it was an unexpected move that people just weren't looking for, and there was a shocked silence.
Do you know approximately what year that was?
I think it was 1987.
Excellent. So you got 3 great photos of Aretha here that we will have for sale, and we'll move on to Billy Joel. That was from the Q. That was about 2012. And I probably shouldn't talk about how that was one of my most horrific concert photograph experiences ever.
Probably not, because we all had those experiences.
And I would name names and it would upset people. So we'll just keep going on to...
but that's what you do, Joe. You upset people.
I'm not now. I'm trying to take the high road. I really am.
Good. Okay, and my Billy Joel photos, I think were taken at Richfield Coliseum quite a few years before in the 80s, and that was back when people smoked, which really was not a good idea, but we have a lot of pictures of people smoking, and to be honest, cigarette smoke makes nice pictures.
Billy Joel, great fact, opened up for Michael Stanley.
Did he really?
At the Akron Civic Theater. I believe it was the Stranger Tour, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And I believe, if I am mistaken, hordes of his fans will let me know. But he did open for Michael back during one of those early tours.
Yeah, lots of people did.
Let's move on now to another great photo of yours, Bobby
Womack, a Cleveland-born R&B artist who went on to write many great tunes that became classics and was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
How about this guy?
Bo Diddley. Bo Diddley is a gunslinger. Bo Diddley played the Agora back in the 70s and was a road warrior to the very end and was one of the 50s pioneers of, that unique guitar sound and riff that was used by, everybody from the Rolling Stones on down. Owed a debt, a legacy to Bo Diddley.
I got to go back to that first photo. The light reflections off his glasses are amazing. That is just so cool.
I think that was the point when I was kind of getting a little bit bored with shooting people. I started experimenting with filters. I went through a period. I had a star filter. I had one of those filters that breaks up the images into multiple images. Because sometimes when you're shooting, sometimes up to 7 nights a week, you just want to shake it up a little. And I think that's what I was doing here.
Do you use those Instagram filters nowadays?
I don't, no.
You were using filters way before Instagram.
Yeah.
All right, move on to Bootsy Collins. What a just a flamboyant, charismatic performer.
Oh, yes. And this was, I think, when he was with George Clinton and Parliament Funkadelic. And it was at a place in Akron that I no longer remember the name. It existed for maybe 2 years. And I just remember trying to count the number of performers on stage because George Clinton was famous for having extremely large bands, and I think I lost count like 28. But Bootsy Collins it didn't matter if there were 300 people on stage. Bootsy Collins just really stood out because he is just so distinctive.
How does Bootsy make any money if 28 people have to get paid?
Well, that was George Clinton's problem back then. I mean, Bootsy was also touring as a solo artist, which he always did, and I think he continues to this day. So I'm sure George Clinton just said, here's how much you get paid for the tour, and Bootsy said, double it, and I'm there.
Now we move on to Bruce Springsteen.
Oh, yes, a Cleveland favorite.
Yes, from way, way back.
Way back.
This was a shot, I think, from the first time I photographed him in Cleveland at the Q, I think around 2012. And there's another shot. Nice crowd shot there. This is from the 2015 or 2016 show, and this actually is one of my most stolen photos by people.
Oh, that's a real distinction.
I've had this used on bootleg Springsteen T-shirts and bootleg CDs, and actually contacted his management to let him know that these are not done with my permission. I didn't want them to see my photos and think that I was selling them to these bootleggers or whatever.
Right.
This goes back to that first show 2012 that I photographed, and now we get into some of your shots. And where and when were these taken?
I don't have specific dates on a lot of them because I shot so many of his shows back in the early to mid 80s. I actually shot a series of shows on the River Tour for Rolling Stone magazine. So I shot a bunch of shows in Detroit, multiple nights in Cleveland.
That's really a great shot.
I think that was in Cleveland. I want to say July 1980, but I could be wrong. So most of these were taken that time period. Now that one is more recent. That was taken in 2004 when Springsteen came to the Q with a group of artists that included Little Steven, Michael Stipe of REM, John Fogerty of Creedence Clearwater Revival, and Conor Oberst, who performed for Rock for Change for John Kerry. That was quite a show. They all jammed on stage that night, and I have shots of many of them together. And that's another shot from that night.
Lots of great shots from Springsteen in Cleveland. That's another great one.
Yeah, there's one also from the River Tour of Bruce and Clarence. Bruce leaning on Clarence's shoulder the way he often did. He interacted always with Clarence on stage, which was just one of the things that made his shows magic.
Another great black and white shot here.
And I
Bruce
love that
Clarence.
shot in profile. It's just really dramatic and striking, and I was lucky to get a shot like that. And then we have another one of them together, just really having a good, joyous time.
Looks like this one, the date says July 84.
Yeah, I shot a lot of the Born in the USA tour, too. And that one with his arm up, finger pointing, that's also from Born in the USA.
I believe the date on this one says July 81. Little Steven
That's
in the background
earlier.
there.
That's also the River Tour, before Little Steven left the band.
And then speaking of Michael Stipe, I think we have him in this photo here.
Yeah, that's also from the Rock for Change. That's when they were jamming together. And I think that's Born in the USA. That's very dramatic. I love the silhouette with the blue lights behind it. I have a theater background, and I was aiming to be a lighting designer. So I've always been very aware of the lights on stage, and I like to try to capture dramatic lighting effects. And that one, I was really proud of.
Yeah, that is a great one. Now we move on to one of my, actually one more Bruce shot, a black and white one here.
Yeah, I think that was also from the River Tour, where he's thumbs up, doing a great job.
This classic Telecaster.
Yeah.
We move on to one of my favorite, most colorful photos, Cher.
Ah, yes.
That comes back.
Never understated.
Yeah, that comes back from the Q around 2012, I believe. I did a print of that on metallic paper, and man, those colors just popped so much. Doesn't get much more rock and roll than Chuck Berry doing the duck walk.
That's right.
That was from Playhouse Square, one of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's Music Master series, where they did a tribute to Chuck Berry. And they had all kinds of people come out and do Chuck Berry songs like Lemmy and David Johansen. And then at the end, Chuck came out and did some songs himself.
Yeah,
And,
but you know that before he came out, he got the money. He was famous for always making sure he got the money before he went on stage. And he had like a locked briefcase that he carried that he attached to himself so nobody could take his money. And it was, even though it sounds quirky, it was justified because a lot of these pioneers of rock and roll from the 50s, particularly the black ones, didn't get their due. Other people, I mean, how many people have used Chuck Berry's riffs in their song and become huge doing so? Again, the Rolling Stones, the Beach Boys, I mean, you could just go on and on. And I'm sure Chuck, seeing this and seeing people, in their private jets and their piles of cocaine based on his riffs, said, you know what? I need some of this too.
I was really, really happy to be able to photograph just such an iconic legend that kind of kicked off the whole genre, basically, like Chuck Berry.
Definitely one of the founding names.
I never would have imagined I would have had a chance to shoot somebody as legendary as him. Very fun show to shoot. Then we move on to the Commodores. Tell us a little bit about this one.
Lionel Richie, who, he's one of those artists. The 80s was a major era for superstars. And really, I think a lot of that was surrounded Michael Jackson, who had, off the Thriller album, had like 7 chart records, which was unheard of. Before then, you released one record, it was a big hit, there was a second, and the third was always a fall off, and that was it. They went on to the next album. But you started seeing people having 4, 5, 6 hit singles off records and becoming really, really big. To the point where you thought they were going to be around forever. And some of these names are now virtually forgotten. I mean, who remembers how big Lionel Richie was, or Huey Lewis, But they were massive back in the day. And Lionel Richie was definitely one of the people at the top of the pantheon.
And someone else at the top of that pantheon, some of your most iconic photos, I think, in from my opinion, is the man, the legend, David Bowie.
Bowie never has really fallen out of the pantheon because... Not so much because he always had huge hits, because a lot of his albums were not huge hits, but because he always was trying something new. And, his theatricality, a lot of these shots are from the 1983 tour, where, he used a lot of props. He used a lot of interesting staging. I've got one of him holding up a skull on stage.
Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. So... you never knew what to expect. That was from the 1990 tour, which is the same show where I got the shots of him and Bono from U2, which is the only time that they were ever on stage together. And I'm pretty sure I'm the only photographer that ever shot those two together on stage. And that was a very exciting night. The next shots, these are from a show that's probably one of the most legendary in all of music history. This was 1872.
1872?
Yeah, 1872. and 1972 at Music Hall. And it was David Bowie's first show on American soil.
Wow.
This was the first time he played in America during the Ziggy Stardust era.
Wow.
And there were a number of reasons. I mean, a lot of people credit Brian Kinchy, who recently passed away, because he formed the first Bowie fan club in America. But he didn't come here exclusively because he had a super fan here. He also came here because WMMS was one of the first stations in America to play his music. And that can be credited particularly to Billy Bass, who was the music director, or was he the program director at the time. And he just pumped it to the point where the other air personalities were going, come on, stop already, you're overdoing it. But he ended up, making Bowie a huge star here before he became a star anywhere else. This show immediately sold out. And he came back 2 months later. Music Hall holds 3,000. He came back 2 months later, played Public Hall on the other side of the building, which holds 10,000. He played 2 nights.
Wow.
So in 2 months, he went from 3,000 people in Cleveland to 20,000 people.
Nice pick there with Ronson.
Yeah, Mick Ronson, who was like a really, really key part of that iconic sound of his from the early 70s.
Then we go back, I think, to that 1990 show.
Yeah.
and one of him just staring menacingly at you.
Oh, I like the hard stare there. Yeah, that's great.
This woman's getting a little too close with her camera.
No, he was into the moment, and he really didn't pay attention to photographers. He wasn't one of the people that we had that kind of problem with. And there's more of the drama. Someone taking off his dark glasses. One of the chorus. I don't remember specifically what it related to, but the show was full of dramatic moments like that.
And again, every photo that you see on your screen is available for sale, various sizes. You can find links to purchase these photos at the Sonic and Iconic Facebook page. There'll be a link right on the live stream that you're watching right now, and you can also find links on the very front page of joecleon.com. So please purchase some of these photos. They are printed and they'll be shipped by our good friends at NEO Pro Imaging. NEOProimaging.com is their website. Best printer in Cleveland, and they will take care of you with really high quality reproductions of our concert photos. Let's move on to the man, the legend, Elton John. That was the first time I photographed him, I think, at Blossom, and that might have been 2011 or 2012. And with Elton, you have to be ready when the lights go down because he walks across the stage for about 30 seconds, and then he sits down at the piano. And the piano shots are okay, but the shots you really want to get are when he's walking around, and that's just for a very short period of time. I really didn't get a whole lot of great piano shots at this show, but then he came to Covelli Center 3 or 4 years later, and I got my favorite shot of Elton, which you see right there. Again, like you were talking about, composing the lights in interesting areas in the photo. I definitely moved around a little bit to get that light in the perfect position.
Right.
And I love how the
That's
reflections of
great.
the lights are coming across his face.
Yeah.
That was just my favorite shot. If only he would have cleaned the smudges on his piano a little better. I didn't Photoshop those out. Now we move on to some of your Elton John shots. What a great shot there.
I think these are from Blossom in the 80s. Elton was always changing. I mean, he always had these great costumes. And if you read his bio, which I did recently, he talks about how much he reveled in coming up with these outrageous costumes and just really having fun with it. I think the next shot really shows you, he's got that militaristic look with the giant hat. And sometimes his costumes got the better of him. They took over the show. But always knew he was having a good time. There he is pointing and just a pensive piano shot.
Such an emotional performer.
Yeah, and I love this one because he's just, turning around and looking at the audience, but you can see the fancy embroidery on his jacket.
So were you on stage, or did he have his back to the audience?
I was probably way at the side. I think this was at Blossom, so I was probably in the side aisle.
Oh, okay.
Is what I'm guessing.
Nice shot with the light there.
I love the light shining down on him, the cone of light.
That's a great shot.
Very dramatic. And there he's really getting into it, loudmouth scream. And then this one's funny, too. He's standing on the piano, and you see guitarist Davy Johnston back there. He's just looking like, oh, my God, what is he doing? Is he going to fall? So I enjoy that. And then we have Eric Clapton, not generally the most exciting or, photogenic performer, kind of introverted. But again, I think the lights really make this photo because you see the corona of light behind his hair and you capture that intensity of the expression because he's really into his guitar playing.
Yeah, he's really into the moment, in the zone, doing that solo right there.
Yeah, you can tell. And
another great shot with the horizontal lights behind him.
Yeah, the multicolored lights, yeah.
He looks like he's giving you the middle finger.
No. That wasn't Clapton's style.
I think that was planned. He just didn't like you.
No. That was more Lou Reed's style.
What year would that be, do you think?
Probably about 85, I'm guessing.
Okay.
I'd have to look it up, but I'm thinking that's around. Yeah, there's another really getting into it shot. He's looking down. I like the angle, too, because you're looking up at him, so it makes him look monolithic. Low angles make people look better. That was taken in Detroit at Pine Knob in, I want to say, probably 85, 86. He had Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits on tour with him, and they shared guitar. Eric Clapton was always the kind of guy he was like sort of an anti-guitar hero. He didn't like to showboat himself. He liked to kind of be in the background and share the spotlight with somebody. And he did so on this tour with Mark Knopfler, who maybe wasn't widely known as a guitar god, but was really an amazing player.
Was that right around the time that Money for Nothing was on the charts, or was that
It was
after?
a little after,
Little
I think. I think it was a little later.
That's a great venue, Pine Knob. I saw Rush there a couple times.
Did you?
Yeah. Never photographed anything there, but I saw a handful of shows there.
Yeah.
Okay, now we move on to Fats Domino.
Fats Domino, another of the founding figures from the 1950s, who had a number of big hits and a unique kind of rolling piano sound that was also very foundational in music. Also a major figure in the Louisiana, New Orleans scene, who lost a lot of stuff in Katrina. They were able to rescue some of his archives, but he was living in New Orleans when Katrina hit, and they had to get him and his things out of there to preserve this important part of music history.
Where and when was this photo taken?
I'm pretty sure this was the American Music Master series, the Rock Hall series, so I'm guessing that it was taken at Playhouse Square probably in the 90s.
Okay. The one that I did with Chuck Berry was
I shot
2010 or 2011.
Yeah, I shot
like
probably 6 or 7 of us. They started, oh God, when was the first one? Probably in the 90s sometime.
Okay.
Because they've been going on for quite a while. I mean, they've paid tribute to a ton of major figures to the point where now they call it just the Music Master series because they're not all Americans anymore.
Right. Now we move on to a band which I thought was okay, played their hits on the radio, but my wife is a huge fan, so we started going to shows once we hooked up, and I've really become a big fan of all of their work, and that is Fleetwood Mac. Great shot of Lindsay there, again, somebody really in the moment at that time, playing a solo and singing at the same time. And then the next shot here, probably one of my top 10 favorite photos, Stevie Nicks. I hate to guess how old she is and able to get her leg up like that. I don't think I could do that by the time I was 20. I definitely envy her limberness.
That's because she gave up cocaine and lost weight. I did an interview with her in the mid-90s, I think, when I was with the Free Times, and I was really surprised at just how candid she was. I mean, it was like talking to your girlfriend. I think we talked on the phone for like an hour and a half, and she gave me her phone number in case I wanted to call her back. But she was very open about the fact that, in the 70s and 80s, we were all just filling ourselves up with drugs, and it couldn't go on like that. And that she had cleaned up and she'd started to, eat better and do a fitness routine. And you see the results of that there. So, cleaning up is good for you.
That's been one of my top 10 selling photos, one of the top 10
it
sold
should be.
photos
Yeah,
that I have.
it's a great photo.
In the 10 years or so since I've taken it, one of the most popular for sure.
Yeah.
We go on to Lindsay with the crowd. Once again, always right there in front of the crowd. I like how when the songs end, he just leans over into the crowd and just like basks in the applause. He does that after every song, and sometimes the other band members look like they're a little annoyed by that, but he just takes 5 or 10 seconds and just leans out into the crowd. He kind of closes his eyes and he just soaks in all the applause, and I always thought that was kind of cool. There's one of him and Stevie together with Mick in the background. And another one of Lindsay with the silhouetted background singers. I really love silhouettes. Anytime I can capture a silhouette.
It's nice, yeah.
Those are some of my favorite photos are silhouettes.
Yeah.
And now we take the time machine back about 25 or 30 years for some of your Fleetwood shots. Wow, what a great shot of Lindsay. I think that's probably the same guitar.
Could be, people fall in love with their guitars. Yeah, absolutely.
And just such an amazing original style. Nobody plays like him.
I know.
Nobody finger picks or plays like him. He is just in a rock world that is so saturated with artists. He's really one of the most original as far as his playing goes.
Yeah.
Now we move on to Mr. Zappa. Speaking of someone who writes really original music.
Yeah, he's one of those rock artists who was so off the wall that he's really hard to peg. His music was influenced by a lot of avant-garde composers from the early 20th century, like Edgar Varese. And he also got known to the public more for a lot of novelty tunes that he did, because he was also big into doing satirical tunes. And many people remember him breaking through for, just basically stupid shit.
Dancing Fool.
He did. Yeah, just these off the wall kind of snide, tongue in cheek kind of tunes that he always did. But there was always like a really, really serious musical underpinning to all his enterprises.
I think his biggest hit was with Moon Unit and Valley Girl.
Yeah, Valley Girl, yeah.
It is such an eclectic and amazing technical body of work, and his biggest hit was Valley Girl.
I know, it was just a strange career, and he was, he was taken from us too soon. He died when he was just in his 50s of prostate cancer, which is disappointing because you never know what he would have gone on to do.
He refused to do any treatment.
Yeah, well, he refused to go to the doctor at all to find out if he was sick, so... that was too bad.
Great shots of Frank. Now we move on to Holland Oates. Great shot of Daryl Hall there getting into it.
Yeah, they were another band that were so huge in the 80s. I think it'd be hard for people to conceive now just how huge they were because they're largely forgotten. A lot of their tunes are just sort of considered kind of nice wallpaper.
But man, they had hit after hit after hit.
They had hit after hit, and the tunes were well constructed. There's Daryl Hall with G. Smith, who played with a number of different major acts. I think he was in. Wasn't he in the house band of one of the late night talk shows
I think
too?
so. I'm just staring at his hair.
Yeah, well, that's 80s hair. Actually, that sort of overly styled mullet, we used to call that lounge hair because all the lounge bands had that hairstyle where it was very short and coiffed on the top and then it's really long. And, it just really hurt the ozone layer with the amount of hairspray they used.
And we have Mr. Oates, the winner of the Baba Booey Lookalike Contest.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great shot of that Rickenbacker. I love that guitar.
Yeah. And that is probably the number one example of someone who was so huge, and now you would bring his name up to people, they couldn't name a single song he did, which was Huey Lewis. And of course, one of the best known songs that he did was The Heart of Rock and Roll. And that thing got beaten to death in the whole campaign for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because, of course, he calls out Cleveland, among other cities, in it.
That's a great shot with the lights above him.
Oh, yeah, and the lighting on his face, I loved that. I mean, he was a really great performer. There he is in an Indians shirt, and I have a number of performers. This is a very common thing that music artists do. They go to a city, and they put on, like, a hat or a T-shirt for the local sports team.
I have a bunch of those, too.
In fact, I just posted a couple of those on my Facebook page the other day. One was of John Bon Jovi.
I have one of Bon Jovi with a Browns jersey on.
Yeah, I have one of Stephen Percy of Rat. He's got a Browns jersey on.
You sure it's not just brown from being dirty?
No, it's Browns for sure.
Just checking.
So here's Huey Lewis with the Indians T-shirt because he knew that was going to endear him to local fans.
Speaking of Brown, how about Jackson Browne?
Jackson Browne, yeah. Jackson Browne was really hard to shoot because he didn't like to see photographers in the front, so you were always like, back, 15 rows or whatever. And he also was not, he was more a cerebral performer rather than a dynamic performer. So you really had to wait for these moments when he was getting emotional in the song and you could catch something of the feeling of what he did.
Moving on to the Jacksons.
Oh, yeah. That was during the Thriller tour, the Jacksons Thriller tour. And that was a huge tour. And this was taken in Detroit, which is a good example of one thing that we used to encounter back in the day, which was that the earlier in the tour you shot somebody, the more the photos were worth because everybody was doing their articles and their reviews and everything. And the Thriller tour, pretty much, I don't remember if it was the first dates, but it was very early in the tour. They may have launched the tour in Detroit, and they ended it in Cleveland, like 8 months later.
Now, that Detroit show, would that be at Cobo Hall, or where would that be?
No, it wasn't at Cobo. It was at Pontiac Silverdome.
Okay.
Yeah, they were huge. I mean, they were too big for Cobo Hall. And the interesting thing was they did, they did like 3 nights or something. I know, multiple shows. And I went, not the first night, but maybe the second or third night. And they told us we could shoot 5 numbers. And again, it was one of these things where they had you back, but not that far. You know, these days, as Joe will tell you, they make you shoot from the soundboard. I think they had us in the first horizontal aisle, about 15 rows back. And they told us 5 numbers, which was very generous for a group of that stature. And then at the end of 5 numbers, the publicist came up to me and she said, well, you know, there aren't that many photographers here tonight. So if you want to stay and shoot the whole show,
Oh, my gosh.
go ahead. Now, this is the Jacksons in the Thriller era. So you can imagine it was like, oh, my God.
That album was so huge, I can't believe there wouldn't be more photographers there.
Well, they were there the first night.
Oh,
That's
okay.
what I said. They did a run of nights. I think I was there the second or third night.
Okay.
Everybody was at the opening show, so they probably had 50 photographers the night before.
Gotcha.
But the night I was there, I was one of a handful. And so they said, well, just shoot more of the show if you'd like.
That would never happen today.
So that was like a real, no.
Today they give you 3 songs and kick you out after 1.
Well, I did encounter artists such as Bryan Adams who said 1 song, and I actually drove out to Richfield Coliseum. They said that. I got in my car and drove home.
I won't shoot. I won't shoot shows that are 1 song.
Yeah.
Garth Brooks was the first 30 seconds of like the first 2 songs. So you actually had somebody there with a stopwatch. After 30 seconds, they
Yeah.
would make you stop. And
You
I stayed home for that show.
Yeah, you can't photograph like that.
James Brown.
James
I was
Brown.
a little bit ahead of myself.
Yeah, well, James Brown was always terrific. I think that was taken at the old Front Row,
Wow.
which was up by Wilson Mills in 271. And, you know, he was always a delightful performer. I mean, he just laid it on so thick.
Oh, very dynamic, charismatic stage presence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really nice shots.
Thank
And
you.
we move on to James Taylor. That was
Not as dynamic. More song-oriented than dynamic.
that was at Nautica, maybe 2014, something like that.
Uh-huh.
And there was another shot right when he was coming out, walking over to a stool to sit down. He gave everybody the thumbs up. Really the only 2 decent shots I got, because most of the time his face was right in front of the microphone, and I happened to catch a shot where he turned and smiled at one of his band members. Other than that, they were all kind of straight on in front of the mic.
That's kind of a problem with singer-songwriters like him, yeah. And that's Jackson Browne in, I want to say, probably the late 70s with his band at Blossom Music Center, where every summer he headlined a show at Blossom Music Center. In the 70s and through probably the mid-80s.
I think you said Jackson Browne.
Oh, James Taylor, I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, Jackson Browne did the same thing. There were a bunch of people like this who, in the probably mid to late 70s, headlined every summer. You saw Loggins and Messina, you saw Gordon Lightfoot there, Jackson Browne, James Taylor. I just saw these people so many times there in the late 70s.
And we move on to classic rock guitarist superstar, Mr. Jeff Beck. That was
one of my favorites.
one of my favorite venues at the Akron Civic Theater, at least acoustically. That venue was just built for sound, and man, shows there just sound so much better than just about anywhere else. It's a great venue to see shows. I love that shot where the projection almost looks like the sun is coming through the window. Another shot of Jeff Beck from that same show.
Really highlights the guitar.
Yeah. And then another shot
Yeah.
there. And we move on to, as we continue alphabetically, Jefferson Airplane. Great shot of Grace Slick. Where was that at?
That was at the Petrillo Band Shell in Grant Park in Chicago. It was a free concert in the park. This was, I'm from Chicago, so this was before I came here. And this was the first concert I ever shot.
Wow. 1969.
Yeah, I just had my dad's camera. I wasn't shooting concerts back then. I just thought I'd take the camera and get some ambient event shots. And I just worked my way up to the stage and got a series of shots of the band, who at the time were my favorite band. I mean, I adored Jefferson Airplane. And the concert was just a beautiful, beautiful afternoon. And so the city of Chicago decided to book another one. And they booked Sly and the Family Stone. And that didn't go so well. My sister and I went down, and Sly, as he famously did, wasn't coming out on stage and wasn't coming on stage. And this was a very hot summer night, and people were getting restless, and the atmosphere felt uneasy to us. So we got on the train and came home. And it turned out that rioting broke out, and they started overturning cars and setting fire to police cars. and the concert never happened.
Jefferson Airplane had a little minor skirmish at the Rubber Bowl back in the early 70s. I remember reading an article about that where the police were cracking down on people and they were urging people to, attack the police from stage.
What were they cracking down on people for?
I'm not sure what
Smoking pot?
I'm not sure what was actually going on, but there was police action against crowd members for something, and it turned into the band on stage were, encouraging people to do stuff. I remember years ago, I remember reading an article about that, and I think that they might even shut the show down early.
Okay, I don't remember it.
Now, someone whose shows should always be shut down early, Jimmy Buffett.
Yeah, they should probably be shut down before the audience gets too drunk to move. And the audience, of course, is all wearing stupid hats like you see in this picture here. And they're wearing plastic lace and Hawaiian shirts. And, they're drinking margaritas, by the pitcher full. And what's really embarrassing is that most of the audience are like 50-year-old doctors and lawyers and people who should know better.
They should know better. And we move on to Jimmy Cliff.
Jimmy
That's a great
Cliff
shot.
is one of the founding fathers of reggae, of course. One of its iconic figures, along with Peter Tosh and, of course, Bob Marley. And he played the Agora, as did Bob Marley. I regret that I was not at that show, but I did catch Jimmy Cliff there back in the day when the Agora was the place where every single band played. As they were on their way up, or, you had artists that like Jimmy Cliff who were just so important.
Another classic superstar that I was really happy to photograph that I'd loved since I was a little kid and I saw in the Woodstock movie was Joan Baez. Just an amazing performer. That was from 2016 at Playhouse Square.
Well, she's the reason that I became a metalhead. My sister in the early 60s was a huge folk music fan. She helped found a folk music club at our high school, and she learned to play acoustic guitar, and she had records by all of these people early on: Joan Baez, Bob Dylan, Buffy St. Marie, Judy Collins, Dave Van Rock, and Mike Spelster, all of them. And I thought this music was so incredibly wimpy that it took me forever to get into popular music. And when I did, it was like Black Sabbath. So I went in the opposite direction. But, these were talented performers. They just weren't up my alley.
I was lucky when I was a kid because I was a metalhead with, the Rush and Zeppelin and AC/DC and Sabbath and, all that kind of stuff. But then I also got exposed to stuff like Her from the Woodstock movie and John Sebastian and John Prine. And I became really big fans of those singer-songwriters when I was really young. So it was a nice duality for me. And I think it made my parents think I was a bit crazy because, one day I'd be listening to, Black Sabbath Volume 4, and then the next day I'm listening to John Prine. And I think my mom thought I was a little nutty.
As you'll learn when we do our Michael Stanley stream, I have an inbred aversion to acoustic guitars, and I actually told them at one point that if they didn't get rid of the stools and the acoustic guitars and stop rocking out, that I was never going to see them again. And you'll hear more of that story on Wednesday when we talk about Michael Stanley.
And once again, all these photos that you're seeing tonight and every night this week are for sale, printed and shipped by our good friends at NEO Pro Imaging. Check out neoproimaging.com, the best printer in Cleveland. Anastasia, myself, Janet McCoska, all the concert photographers use NEO Pro Imaging, and we use them because they're great. Great family, great local business, great quality. And they've really done a great job helping us out this week. So check out neoproimaging.com. And again, we'll have links on this live stream, also at the front page of joecleon.com, and on the Sonic and Iconic Facebook page, where you can purchase all the photos, over 1,100 photos that we're going to feature throughout the week. Now we move on to someone who will be in our Cleveland Connected set of photos the last night that we're here on Sunday. And also, classic superstar, Mr. Joe Walsh. That was from Public Square State Theater, I believe, around 2011. And that was a great show for me because Kenny Wayne Shepherd opened. Between the bands, I was outside having a cigarette. Got a call. Hey, the James Gang is here. Joe Walsh hasn't seen him for a long time. He wants a picture for his house. Would you come backstage and take a picture of them? Yeah, sure. Went backstage downstairs, I believe it was, and hung out with the James Gang and did photos for about 20 minutes, and it was just super fun. And from what I understand, one of those photos hangs in Joe's house. My favorite Joe Walsh photo, though, was taken by you, Anastasia, with the Indians shirt and the Indians hat.
Well, that was actually at an Indians game at the old Lakefront Stadium.
That is a great picture. What was he doing there?
I think
he sang the national anthem?
I think so.
Yeah?
I think he was performing. I don't specifically remember. I think he actually may have been doing a show, because back in the 80s, the only way that they could get people into that stadium and draw a crowd of more than 2,000 people in an 80,000 stadium was either to have a concert before or after the show, or after the show or between a doubleheader, or to have fireworks, because fireworks in Cleveland will always draw a crowd. So I think pretty sure he performed a concert there. I do remember seeing Crosby, Stills and Nash perform a concert there, and I do remember a card of wrestling that took place there.
Let's move on to someone who's had more names probably than any other performer.
Oh yeah, I'm very stubborn about this. When I first shot him, he was calling himself Johnny Cougar, and I made the file and labeled the negatives. And then he changed his name to John Mellencamp, which is his real name. And I've stubbornly refused to change any of my file names to John Mellencamp. He's a great performer. He's a nice guy. I interacted with him a lot in the 80s when he was really, really big. And he was just always a really nice guy to deal with and really dynamic on stage, just had a lot of fun on stage.
I think he's another one that people nowadays don't realize how big he was
Exactly,
back then.
Yeah. He was one of those big 80s superstars.
Another singer-songwriter that I wish I would have photographed, Joni Mitchell.
Joni Mitchell, who had a reputation for being a real bitch, and apparently it was well-deserved. I mean, her music was really groundbreaking. She was not just another pretty long-haired female singer-songwriter doing sensitive songs. She was really trying to incorporate a lot of different elements, particularly jazz, into her music. But she was really kind of snippy on stage, and she would yell at people if there was talking in the crowd. One of those people, shut up and pay attention, which tended to really not make crowds that friendly.
Well, your crowds are there because they like you, and then you start bitching at them. That kind of, once the crowd gets pissed at you, that's never a good vibe.
I saw the Beach Boys do that one time at Blossom. It was really awful. Mike Love is up there, and he's going, be quiet and listen to our new songs. Don't just cheer for the old songs. Because, people are clapping when they recognize these.
How do you tell a Blossom crowd to shut up?
Yeah, and particularly because they're saying, you should give as much attention to our new stuff as our old stuff. So they're telling people, if you recognize the song, don't get all excited, just kind of chill it, because we love our new stuff.
Well, every artist always thinks their newest thing is their best.
Yeah, but you don't tell the audience that. I mean, you want them to be respectful and polite, but you don't order them to be respectful and polite.
Keith
Richard, when he was touring solo back in the mid to late 80s, and I think that was from Music Hall, I think. But he was playing on his own at that point, and I never shot the Rolling Stones, so it was exciting to get to see Keith Richards.
Another great performer. That's a great shot,
Leon
too.
Russell.
Yeah,
That's
Leon Russell.
one of my older shots there. That was taken in the early 70s. I'd say maybe 72, 73. And you can tell he's very young there, because my later shots, he's got really gray hair. But I was lucky enough to shoot one of his final shows, too, when he played on one of the Music Masters series for the Rock
I shot that
Hall.
show, too, yeah.
So, he died a couple of years ago. But he was more a behind-the-scenes person who wrote songs, arranged songs. He was music director for other artists like Joe Cocker. So he was a driver behind the scenes. Linda Ronstadt, yeah, she was an interesting person because, some people gave her a lot of credit, some people gave her none, because she did not write her songs. She launched the careers of a lot of really good singer-songwriters who maybe weren't getting enough attention. She kind of lacked an identity, too. I mean, she started out as sort of a country rock, Americana artist, and then she went through phases of being a rocker and being sort of new wave, and she went through a Tex-Mex phase, and then she went through a phase of doing these really, highly arranged 50s tunes with Nelson Riddle. So she was always evolving and changing. Most of these shots, I think, were taken at Blossom Music Center, mostly in the late 70s, early 80s.
Lionel Richie, this is solo, not with the Commodores?
Yeah, this is his solo tour when he was Lionel Richie. You know, he was a big deal at that point and selling out Richfield Coliseum.
That's how big of a deal. How big of a deal are you, Lionel? And that's what he...
Yes, really. I just asked him, you know. So that's great. Oh, my God.
Love that shot.
Little Richard. Yeah, that was taken at Public Hall in the early 70s. And you could always count on Little Richard for a flamboyant evening.
Oh, yeah.
I remember actually, this had to be probably in the 2000s sometime, there was an event at the Rock Hall, and there were all these serious, you know, Jan Wenner type people on stage talking about something that they were doing. And then all of a sudden there's a commotion in the audience, and from the back of the room, in walks Little Richard. And of course, it was all over at that point. Nobody wanted to hear these suits talking about how they were going to remodel something or add a kitchen or whatever they were talking about. I don't remember, because he just came in late and stole the show. And I'm sure it was incredibly, incredibly deliberate that he did that.
And we'll move on to Madonna. I think this was the first time she had played Cleveland probably in 25 years. This was in the early 2010s, I believe. Again, not really a personal fan of her music, but very, very happy to shoot just such an iconic performer. I was really, really happy to shoot this show, and that's probably my favorite shot. I love that shot. Sold a lot of that one too. That's been a very popular Madonna shot for me. And then we go back to some of her earlier Cleveland stuff.
That was 85 when she was just breaking. That was at Public Hall. And
would that be like a Virgin tour?
Would that be Like a Virgin? 85.
That was her first album. I'm not sure what the
that
what
would
the
have
year
been
was, but wow.
85. So yeah, and you know, she was starting to establish some of the things that she based her later shows on, including, you know, the team of dancers that surrounded her.
Have you shot her more than once?
Twice.
Okay, so this was from...
That's from 87 at Richfield Coliseum.
Okay.
Yeah. And by that point, her act was very developed.
Another Coliseum shot?
Yeah.
And then I think we go back to the other
Go
show.
back, that's Music Hall again, or Public Hall, excuse me. And like I said, you can start to see some of the things that she used in her videos. That was back at Richfield.
Yeah, that's a great shot.
Yeah, and back at Public Hall. So you can just sort of see, you know, just how she changed in a matter of 2 years, that she had completely evolved her style and, you know, started to really bring herself up a level.
Really like the chair shot, too. Very
Yeah,
cool.
that was very dramatic.
Continuing on here in our alphabetical order of classic superstars, Mary J. Blige.
Mary J. Blige, she was one of the biggest entertainers in R&B in the early 2000s, and that was taken at the Q. You know, she was sort of considered an icon of women's empowerment in soul music. You know, very, very powerful presence who spoke to, you know, the things that women were trying to fight their way past.
We move on to Michael Jackson. Wow, so
Actually,
jealous that you got to photograph
that
him.
was actually the Jacksons, and these are interesting to me. That was taken in the late 70s at, I think it was the Palace Theater. It was Playhouse Square. And it was a completely different Michael Jackson than I just saw, you know, 6 years later at in Detroit. It was pre-plastic surgery. He did not have that weird little baby voice. And he was open and interacting with people. I mean, he was bringing kids out of the audience to dance with him, and was very extrovert. And you just saw in those 5 or 6 years this massive change in every aspect of how he acted, how he talked, what he looked like. There's from the Thriller tour.
That's a great shot.
And you can see there's a whole difference in his face, but there was just a whole difference.
But see, the first rounds of plastic surgery, like that photo right there,
Yeah,
I thought he really looked good.
Yeah.
If he would have stopped right there.
Yeah. Well, he had a deep-seated problem, and it wasn't, I mean, a lot of people talked about, he wanted to be a woman, he wanted to look like Diana Ross, but I remember seeing the Martin Bashir interview with him, and he talks about how when he was in the Jackson 5 and they used to rehearse, and their father would yell at them and browbeat them and would tell Michael all the time how ugly he was. And that's got to be the root of why he had plastic surgery. You're going to put you out in front of thousands of people, and your father keeps telling you you're ugly. I can't even conceive of that.
Speaking of someone who is ugly, Michael Stipe.
Oh, Michael Stipe isn't ugly. Michael Stipe looks just like a guy. That was taken.
I'm just not an REO fan. I'm just kidding.
No, but this was a huge. I mean, it was one of the foundational bands of what we call college rock.
Yeah.
That they broke out through college radio, REM, and part of that whole.
When I was on college radio, man, they were huge.
They were huge. Absolutely huge.
The two biggest college radio bands when I was on back in the mid '80s. REM and Primus.
Yeah, okay.
They were just both
But this was from
gigantic.
the Rock for Change tour when they were performing for the John Kerry campaign in 2004.
And we move on to a great black and white Moody Blues shot.
Moody Blues. It was very hard to get exciting shots of them. The Moody Blues are one band, went on stage, stood in one place, and reproduced the sound of the album exactly. So there wasn't a whole lot of excitement, but I was able to get this one shot of 4 of the 5 members all lined up. So that was quite a coup.
Neil Diamond, that was from the
Oh, yeah.
second time I shot Neil Diamond at the Q. That might have been, I think, 2017. And then this shot here goes back about maybe 5 years before that. So nice double dose of Neil there. Actually, one of my probably top 50 selling artists. It's kind of surprising that I've sold quite a few prints of Mr. Diamond.
That is.
Neil Young, what a great shot there.
Neil Young was another one of those artists who changed a lot from every tour. I mean, he had his rockabilly tour, he had his new wave tour. You know, he was just always doing something different. And this was the one where he had the giant oversized props. You know, he's got that prop Fender amp.
I shot a show at Wolstein, we'll see here in a minute, where he had oversized props also.
Yeah.
And that was probably this here.
Yeah.
Probably the worst show I ever shot. Because it was so dark, and he had a giant 40-foot mic stand that he hid behind for a lot of the show.
Yeah.
And usually I'll get a good, couple dozen photos that are really good out of a show. And this was the only good photo I got from that show. And I really had to process it to bring up the light levels and stuff. Probably the only show where I've only got one photo, and it's a moderate photo at that.
It's
but
very frustrating.
I included it even though it's not that good.
Yeah. And there he is when he had all the costumed figures. That was at Richfield Coliseum too. So that was an interesting and unusual show. That one was actually an accidental double exposure, but I just really liked it. And that was when he did his sort of rockabilly influence show out at Blossom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a cool double exposure.
Yeah. And,
nice shot of him playing the harmonica there.
Yeah, very introverted.
Move on to Pat Benatar.
Pat Benatar was another one of those artists where Cleveland was an early adopter, and she kind of ended up having a Cleveland connection because Neil Giraldo, who was in local Cleveland bands like Lover's Lane, ended up being her guitarist and then marrying her. They're still married to this day. And he was very instrumental in developing her sound and writing some of her songs. And he was really a local Parma boy who made good. And she was an interesting character, too, because she didn't have a natural feel for rock and roll. She was a classically trained artist. But she really worked on her shows, which to some degree, like this one, this was an early appearance here at the Agora, where, she's wearing the kind of an animal print top and
nice shot of her and Neil
everything.
together.
She was very styled, and her movements were very planned. She didn't have a natural flow, but she had a hell of a voice. And as time went on, she became more relaxed, more natural, like you see in this photo of her. She's holding up the mic, and she's really thoughtful there. She was a great artist, a great singer.
Another artist that both of us have had the pleasure to photograph,
Patti
Patti Smith.
Smith.
That's from maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years ago.
One of my longtime favorites, yeah.
And then we move on to your shots.
That was taken at Agency Recording, which was over the old Agora on East 24th Street, and it was after a show, and she was up there mixing a track that became, that's engineer Jim Hillenbrand, mixing a track that I think was a B-side of a single. I think it was My Generation, if I recall correctly. But a lot of artists, recorded their show downstairs at the Agora, and then afterwards went upstairs to, do the work they needed to on it.
And then we have someone here that I had the pleasure to photograph twice, once in Columbus and once here in Cleveland.
Paul McBoring.
Paul McCartney. You're so mean to him.
I
He's
know.
such an influential, just mega superstar, and you act like he's, Smashing Pumpkins
Boring.
or something. He's not boring.
No, the Smashing Pumpkins weren't boring. They were just awful.
Well, I really enjoyed these shows. I'm not the biggest Beatles fan, but man, anytime I can shoot royalty like that, I'm just crazy happy. Both of these shots, that one and why isn't this next one coming up? There it is. That's from 2015.
I like that one. That's one of my favorites.
And then the next year, 2016, I believe, was when he played Cleveland.
I like the color of his jacket.
So I was able to shoot those.
That's a nice blue.
With the blue jacket, yeah, and him waving to the crowd.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then we go back to Columbus, I believe, for one more shot. Moving on to Paul Simon, someone that I photographed twice. 2011, this picture, I think that might have been Akron Civic. I don't really remember. I know this next shot, 2017, that was from Nautica. I got better shots at that show. Peter Gabriel. Yeah, when was that taken?
That was taken, I want to say, mid-'80s. I mean, he'd given up the makeup, which he did early in his solo career. And this was probably a little bit pre-WOMAD when he did the world music thing. And I think that was at Music Hall. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was. That was the same time period, yeah.
Now we move on to Phil Collins. That was from 2018 at the Q, and that is his son on the drums. And that is the moment during the iconic drum fill during In the Air Tonight. So probably the most iconic moment of the show. Mm-hmm. Really sad to see what he's going through these days. Have you seen any of those stories about
with the awful wife who was trying to take him for everything he has?
She moved her new boyfriend into his like $40 million mansion, and he can't get that. They're like squatting in his mansion.
I know.
Anyway, older Phil Collins shots.
That was taken in the 80s, when he was a huge superstar, when he had hit after hit after hit. And he was sort of considered the epitome of the boring, middle-of-the-road, soft rocker. His name was sort of, to people in the 80s, kind of like what Nickelback is to people now. It's the band you make fun of. But he made some great music, and he was a huge success. And now this new wife has been trying to take everything from him.
Probably one of my top 10 shows was Genesis on the Mama Tour at the Coliseum. I had second row center stage, and just the drum work between him and Chester Thompson was just unbelievable.
Yeah.
The dueling drum solo that they did and stuff, and that was one of the first tours where they had Verilights, which were a light that could change any color.
Yes, I know.
Before you had to put those gels in front of them, and this was a big deal.
I did that in school. I was a lighting designer.
There was a lot of articles and a lot of buzz about that Verilight thing, and it just totally changed the way that stages were lit and the way that shows were presented.
There's so many innovations in stage lighting now. You just about can't keep up.
But yeah, that was one of the big ones early on for that self-titled Genesis album.
Yeah.
Moving on to someone who I really don't like, Pretenders. She's a horrible person.
She's a bitch, yeah.
She's a horrible person.
I love the band. I don't like her that much. We've got more photos of her in the Cleveland Connected section. Her connection to the Cleveland music scene is tenuous at best. She's from here. She's from Akron. She really never was part of the music scene here. She never really played much other than jamming on stage with a couple of bands occasionally. She moved to London, I think 73 or 74, and it was after she moved to London that she really got involved in music. She came back in 1980, played the Agora. It was March 18th, 1980. And that was her first show that she really did in Cleveland. Her first album was out. The show was sold out. She was a bitch to everybody. She was yelling at one of her aunts for taking pictures backstage. She was just really, really pricky when you think she would have been celebrating her success, but no, she was not.
Well, things haven't changed, I guess.
But, what can you say? She's a great performer. She's a great songwriter. She's a great talent.
I think out of all the photos of yours that I've seen, this next one is probably my favorite.
That's probably my number one selling photo.
I was at that show. That's Purple Rain Tour, right?
Yeah.
I was at that Coliseum.
No, that was at that was the hockey arena in Detroit.
Oh, okay. I went to the Coliseum show, which was probably that same week or right around that time.
The name is escaping me right now. It wasn't Cobo Hall. Joe Louis Arena.
What a great shot.
And
what a great
I
shot.
have a great story behind these two, this and the next one. this was the first show that I ever encountered where they said you have to shoot from way back. They said you have to shoot from the penalty box. So I got there early and staked out a good place, and I was, chatting with one of the security guards, to pass the time. And just before the show starts, a famous New York photographer, who shall remain nameless, comes swooning in with her assistant, with her tripods, with multiple cameras, and sets up right in front of me and all the other photographers that have been waiting there for like an hour. And then she's right in front of me. I can't see anything. And I'm like, what am I going to do? Am I going to yell at her? What?
Should have kicked her ass.
I didn't know what to do. And it's funny because this happened to me twice in Detroit with shows. And I feel someone tugging on my arm, and I look, it's the security guard that I've been talking to. He says, get all your stuff and come with me. He had spotted a seat in the second row that was empty. And he said, you sit here, I'll watch over you to make sure that nobody hassles you.
Nice.
So I was shooting from the second row. All these other people are shooting back from the penalty box. So I was able to get these really, really tight close-ups of him. And that nameless security guard is my hero. And this is why you should never go in there and be rude to the security guards and go, don't you know who I am? I'm somebody important. And the funny thing was, a couple of years later, I was in Detroit, I think also at Joe Louis, I don't remember for sure, for an Alice Cooper Halloween show. And there was another famous New York photographer who will not be nameless, Mark Weiss, who was famous for kind of trying to screw other photographers. And he shows up, he keeps moving to stand in front of me. And they were taping it for MTV. So they had these two, big platforms with the cameras. And one of the MTV photographers beckoned me to come up and said, shoot the show from up here on my platform. I could just see him steaming. It was
Very
great.
good. Always nice to piss off people like that.
Yeah. That was taken to Ridgefield, yeah.
What tour was that?
It was probably the same time period, maybe a little later. I'm not sure.
Whoops. Okay.
What's that?
That is Rick Derringer.
Oh, the Rick Derringer Band. And that was interesting because the Rick Derringer Band featured two Northeast Ohioans. You see Neil Giraldo at the right and Myron Grumbacher at the left.
Who did he go on to play with? Didn't he go on to play with somebody else?
He played with Benatar as well.
Okay.
And I think they got picked up by Benatar because they were in the Rick Derringer Band. And I was actually the person that connected them with the Rick Derringer Band. So in a way, I'm a few steps removed, but I'm responsible for Neil and Pat being together because I knew Steve Paul, who was Rick Derringer's manager. They were looking for a drummer. I think actually I was at a wedding, and I saw Myron, and I said, Derringer's looking for a drummer. Why don't you call this guy? And he did, and then he brought Neil on board, I think. And
that's a great story.
So they were playing in Derringer, and it was while they were in Derringer that Pat Benatar spotted them.
Very cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of nice. That's something I can feel good about. And there's Rick Derringer, who took somebody's camera, it wasn't mine, and was taking pictures himself.
He looks kind of crazed.
Yeah, well, he was just having fun.
Ringo Starr, is he as boring as Paul, Anastasia?
He's worse. Now, I actually got to hear him one time.
I didn't expect that answer.
Yeah, at Blossom, some friends of mine who had a band called the Bandaloo Doctors had invited me to come out and see them. This was Becca Bramlett from Bonnie and Delaney, Delaney's second wife. And they invited me out to Blossom. And I went to see them, and since I had a pass, I figured I'd stay to see the show. They were so wretched. I left after one song.
This show was great, man. He had Steve Lukather in the band, Todd Rundgren. I got a great shot of Todd Rundgren from the show.
He always had named people in his band, but it was like a train wreck. It really was. It was so awful.
Oh, I love you. I love how opinionated you are. That's one of the things I love about you. Robert Plant. That looks like maybe Manic Nirvana or something?
Yeah, it was also a solo tour.
Blossom?
No, it was at a Music Hall or Public Hall.
It wasn't Manic Nirvana then, because I was at Blossom, because I was at that show.
Yeah, no, this was in the mid-'80s.
That might have been like Shaken and Stirred or something,
Yeah,
or maybe Principle of Moments. No,
I never remember the names of tours.
I think that's later than Principle of Moments.
Yeah.
My guess would be Shaken and Stirred for that picture. I would guess.
Yeah.
That's really a great shot, though. Rod Stewart. That
Oh, he was quite a showman.
that was when he did a show with Stevie Nicks, I believe, in 2012. They toured together,
Yeah.
and that was from The Q. And then I shot him a few years later in 2017 at Blossom, and Cyndi Lauper opened. And then Cyndi Lauper came out for a song with Rod. I forget which song they did together, but I got a couple good shots of them together on stage. And then we go backward in the time machine to your Rod Stewart shots. Man, is that iconic.
Yeah,
Wow.
early 70s when he's wearing the satin, or late 70s when he's wearing the satin suit. Pink, it was bright pink too. You can't tell from this picture, but it was bright pink.
Great shot there with
That I
with
think was early 80s. He did the streetlight thing, which, those shots I just love.
Yeah, that is a great
There
shot.
you're back, next one you're back to the pink suit again. And that was from the Faces.
Wow, was
that was like 1970 or so at Public Hall when he was with the Faces.
Wow, look how young he looks.
Yeah,
That's-
well,
that
he
is
was
incredible.
young.
Yeah.
He was much younger.
Wow.
And that's back at Richfield Coliseum in the early 80s. And that's also, and that
Another
one has been
streetlight
one
shot.
of my best-selling shots.
That's a great shot too at the streetlight.
Yeah.
A shot that I've sold a lot of in recent years, because it was taken in 2017, was Roger Waters when he came to the Q. I love the black and white on the screen with him in front in color. Just a really really neat shot that I like a lot.
It is,
and then that's
yeah.
been a really popular shot. Never had a chance to shoot Pink Floyd, so I was very glad to be able to shoot Roger. Then we move on to the Rolling Stones.
One of the biggest bands in rock and roll.
I had a really bad sciatic nerve problem. I could barely walk for a month. I mean, I could barely walk. And I canceled all my shows for a month until I got healed. But this was the one show I couldn't cancel because I knew I'd probably never have a chance to shoot them again.
They'll be playing for the next 50 years.
Good friend of mine, Scott Edgar, was going down to the show with his son. Let me ride with him because there was no way I could even drive. I was in such pain. Every step was like a lightning bolt of pain through my back leg and up my back. And I somehow went down to that show, shot the Stones. It was so much fun. That's one of my favorite shots right there. It was just a blast. But interspersed with these shots, because there was a big long catwalk and we were at the end of the catwalk, so we were a really good distance away from the stage. Not as far as a soundboard, but we were far away. And every 2 or 3 shots, you would see a shot. I should have put one in here. You'd see one where it was like half of the sky, because I would get a lightning bolt of pain and go, ah! And I would flinch and the camera would go up and I would inadvertently take a shot. So there was all these diagonal shots of half stage, half ceiling when I was just having these lightning bolts of pain. And it's funny when I go through the set and look at them now, but man, I was really in pain. And they had the photographers. This was at Ohio Stadium. They had the photographers up in the press box, which is almost at the very top of the bowl. And you had to walk up probably 300 or 400 steps to get up there. And we walked all the way down to shoot Kid Rock, and then all the way back up and all the way back down to shoot the Stones. And
I would have skipped Kid Rock.
I was in so much pain. When I first got there, I hobbled into the media room, and I was limping, and I was probably really sweating because walking 20 feet was really, really difficult. And when I walked into the media room, the lady thought that I was just a concert goer that needed medical attention. She goes, "Do you need a doctor?"
Well, you did.
And I think I kind of looked at her funny. I was like, "No, just my photo pass." "You're a member of the media?" I go, "Yeah, I just can't walk that good today."
Wow.
But man, I really endured a lot of pain to shoot this show, but I'm really glad that I did because I really love these shots, and
That's nice.
these have been really popular photos as far as from the ones that I've sold.
Yeah.
And just a couple more Stones here. Again, all these photos are for sale. Go to the live stream description here on Facebook. You can also go to the Sonic and Iconic page, my website, joekleon.com, and there'll be information on ordering these photos from NEO Pro Imaging in Cleveland, which is our printer. As we continue on alphabetically from Rolling Stones to Ronnie Spector. What a great shot that is.
Yeah, Ronnie Spector of the Ronettes, who endured a lot at the hands of her husband, Phil Spector, and in the late 70s was making a comeback, thanks in part to Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, who were helping to back her career. They did a single with her called Say Goodbye to Hollywood, which is a great song. And she was performing there at the Agora. She wasn't in great shape. I remember her stumbling over the drum platform, but she was giving it her all. And, she had some hard knocks behind her. So, it was it was good to see her coming back.
Smokey Robinson. I believe that was from one of the Music Masters shows at Public Square.
Yes.
Steve Winwood, tell us about that.
Steve Winwood, that was from Blossom after he got really big in the 80s and really boring. He was, I will say this, that Traffic was one of my original favorite bands, along with Jefferson Airplane, probably the two bands when I started listening to rock and roll music in the late 60s, early 70s, I adored. And I just thought Stevie Winwood was an incredible talent, but his music became background music in the 80s.
Dentist office root canal music.
Yes, very much. And it was disappointing to see how blanded down that he got. But he was undeniably a huge talent. And he started very young with this Spencer Davis group, Spencer Davis, who just died recently, a couple of weeks ago.
I wonder if any angry fans of
when he was 15.
Steve Winwood or Paul McCartney will take offense and chastise us in the comments.
I don't know that anybody really, Paul McCartney maybe, but I don't think that many people really connected to Steve Winwood's post-Traffic career. And then I have a shot of Traffic, I think. No, I guess I don't.
This is from a different Winwood show?
Yeah, that's from a different one.
We move on to Stevie Nicks.
Stevie Nicks.
Is that Blossom?
That was her Blossom solo show.
Did you shoot a lot of shows in black and white and color? Because I don't see a lot of your photos where there's both.
What a lot of people don't realize now is that's actually Fleetwood Mac, is that what the cost of film was back then. The cost of a roll of black and white purchase and processing was probably the equivalent of maybe $15 to $20 today for 36 exposures. The cost of a 36 exposure roll of slide film for the film and processing would be about the equivalent of $75
for color
today for color,
yeah,
for 36 exposures. So every show you went to, you calculated, is this worth shooting in color? And you have to keep in mind that a majority of newspapers didn't use color back then. A lot of magazines were primarily black and white. A lot of the metal magazines were in color, which is why I have a lot of earlier color of metal. But USA Today was actually the first newspaper to start using color, and I think that was the late 80s. So it just wasn't worth the money to say shoot, I don't know, the Doobie Brothers or Huey Lewis in color. You calculated that. If it was Springsteen, yeah. If it was Stevie Nicks, yeah. Prince, yeah. But if it was just some run-of-the-mill band, you didn't shoot color because it wasn't worth it. And now it's like, and a lot of people argue about, digital versus film. For the purposes of concert photography, digital photography was this incredible godsend.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have to sit and calculate, well, should I snap the shutter now, or I'm going to run out of film. You're not running out of film and changing rolls of film in mid-show anymore. And you can also preview your work.
Yeah.
And there were shows, I remember shooting Paul Simon at Pine Knob, where the lights were he had a blindingly white spotlight. And I had a setting that I used for, when the lights were that bright, a daylight setting. And I used that. I got home, and the negatives were so dense, I had to use Farmer's Reducer on them.
Wow.
And the shots are very grainy and not that usable. But now you can preview everything. You can see what you're doing, and you can see what stuff looks like, and you don't have to constantly be rationing.
Now we move to Blossom and The Who. That was from last year, actually September of last year. One
was
of my
that
more
Roger
recent
Daltrey,
photos.
Or just The Who?
That's Roger Daltrey. That's The Who. That's
The
Roger
Who.
Daltrey, Pete Townsend, and then Ringo Starr's son, Zach Starkey, on the drums.
Oh, whoopee.
And this was from the soundboard. And I didn't even realize shooting from the soundboard that he was swinging the mic when I took that photo. I had no idea. I wanted to shoot. Roger Daltrey did a show the summer before in 2018 at Blossom with the Cleveland Orchestra, and the Who were always one of my bucket list bands to photograph. I never had a chance to shoot them, so I really wanted to shoot that show. The orchestra people were so difficult to deal with. They told me I had to buy a ticket if I wanted to shoot the show. And I just wasn't going to do that. I had the money. I could have easily bought the ticket, but just on the principle of things, I'm giving them exposure. They were going to be in a magazine. There were going to be reviews talking about the show that used my photos. I wouldn't do it. And the orchestra people were really pissed because the orchestra guy liked my work and really wanted me to, shoot the show. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to be there for 3 songs. Just let me in for 3 songs and I'll leave. You don't even have to give me a ticket. Just, have somebody, they would, nope, you got to buy a ticket. And, I said, forget it. And I thought that I'd blown my only chance to ever shoot them, and then they came back the following year, last year, and I was really, really happy to have a chance to shoot them because from when I was very young, probably one of the first 10 albums I ever got was Tommy. So I've always been a big, huge...
That was the first album I bought on cassette.
I've always been a huge Who fan, so
Wasn't
to be
my
able to
first
shoot
album,
them,
though.
they were my biggest bucket list band at the time I shot this show, so I was very happy to do it. Get shots of Pete Townsend doing the windmill, just very, very, very fun show. Very cool stuff. And then along with Zach Starkey on the drums, over to the left of Roger Daltrey was Simon Townsend, Pete's son. And man, oh man, did he do a great job. Great, just a really great version of the band last year. I'd seen Roger struggle in the past, and I wasn't really sure how they were going to sound, but man, he was strong, and the band was great. It was really a phenomenal show. Really phenomenal. And then we move on to your Who shots, which were from where and when?
Public Hall. I want to say 71. I saw this band very early.
Oh, wow.
And you don't want to hear what I think about the later editions of the band. That was the first show that I shot. You know, I was just kind of a kid toting my camera around. The first show I shot that, I remember thinking, yeah, I really think these are good shots. Public Hall was kind of a good place to shoot because you could get right up front. It had no pit, but the stage was very low, so you could see right into the performers. And these were all from Public Hall, I
Very,
think.
very cool shots.
Yeah, these are all Public Hall during that early 70s time period.
Very,
Yeah.
very nice.
Yeah. And I really loved the band back in the day. They were one of my favorite bands. That was later. That was at Richfield Coliseum. And I want to say, well, that was after Keith Moon had passed on. And
That's probably like the It's Hard tour or something like that? Or
yeah, I don't know. I never know the names of tours. I never can keep those in my mind. But that would have been maybe, I don't know, 77, 78, 79, something like that.
I think Who Are You was 77 or 78, so I think the first tour with Kenny Jones was probably closer to 79 or 80, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it could have been, you know.
I would guess 1980 for that
Because
show.
Kenny Jones was definitely their drummer at that point. And I just loved the band, but when they got back together and did that reunion tour in 89, after not seeing or speaking to each other for almost a decade and saying, we have no more music to make, it's over. And then they did it for the money. I mean, which Roger Daltrey frankly admitted. Pete Townsend tried to make excuses. And they had it was basically the Who, review with like 16 other musicians. The Who to me was always four guys just bashing out rock and roll.
Yeah.
Even when they toured with Tommy, that's what they did.
And in addition to your Aretha photos, some of my other favorite photos are who we're going to see next, and that's Tina Turner. Your Tina Turner shots are fucking phenomenal. Oh my God.
Tina Turner was fucking phenomenal.
They're just,
What
these
can you
photos
say
are
about
just so
Tina
dynamic
Turner?
and so great. Where was the show
I think that
at?
was the Blossom show. I shot in real quick succession, maybe back-to-back years, Blossom and Richfield Coliseum. And I think that was Blossom. I think that was Richfield. I'm not 100% sure.
Oh my God, it was great. I think there was a hole in the ozone layer just from her hairspray.
Yeah, well, in the 80s, there definitely was a hole in the ozone from everybody's hairspray. It was the 80s.
Those are just
so
great,
what can you say?
great shots. Then we move on to Tom Petty, a bucket list person of mine that I unfortunately never got to photograph.
Tom Petty, and I think these shots were from Blossom.
The couple times he came to town when I was shooting in the last 20 years, I always had something else going on or another photo gig or some reason that I always missed him, and I was really, really sad that I never had a chance to shoot him.
That was I had a couple of bands like that. Leonard Skinnerd was one. Soundgarden. Every time I had a photo pass to shoot Soundgarden, something got in the way. And I eventually did shoot Chris Cornell with Audioslave. Now, that one was taken in Pittsburgh in
Great
the 80s.
jumping shot.
I shot him at the Pittsburgh Arena. I don't remember why, but that's where that was taken.
Tori Amos, I ended up shooting her later on at Kane Park about 4 or 5 years ago.
That was probably the early 2000s, and it was at Playhouse Square.
It's a strange wig.
I think at the State Theater, if I remember correctly.
I remember seeing her first Cleveland show. I was working for Wea at the time, and she had released her first record on one of the Wea labels. And she did a solo show at Peabody's, just her and the piano for the Little Earthquakes tour. And man, it was I was not a fan, but I went just because I worked for the label.
I think all her shows did feature some of her playing just by herself.
This was just strictly her, no band.
Yeah.
And I was not a fan. I said I went just because I was working for the label. But by the end of that show, oh my God, I was the biggest fan. They were one of the handful of artists that I just didn't care about, that once I saw them live, that they won me over. She's definitely one of them, for sure. That was just such a memorable show for me, how good it was. Counting Crows were another band like that I played the songs on the radio when I was on the air, but never cared about them. But once I saw them live, I became a huge fan. Nice Tori Amos stuff. I should have probably included a couple of my shots, but they were soundboard from Kane Park, and
we've got 1,100 shots here. We can't include everything.
They weren't that good.
Come back next year.
My Tory shots weren't that good.
Yeah.
And we move on to Mr. Bono and U2.
My favorite band.
That was 2017 at the stadium. One of the few shots that I shot in the Cleveland Stadium, the football stadium. Just a really, really great show. And again, I'm not a fan really. I saw the Unforgettable Fire tour at Music Hall with the Waterboys opening up, and I'm not a huge fan, but I do like them. But again, just shooting rock royalty like this show was just so much fun. Just because, just to be able to shoot someone of their status is just always a thrill to me, whether I like them a lot or not. And again, being a fan of silhouettes, I love that silhouette shot of them.
Was that the beginning of the show?
I think that was the very beginning of the show when they came out on stage, yeah. And they just had such a great stage setup, and the projection screens and stuff were really cool, as you'll see in this next shot here.
Oh, wow. That's a great shot. Yeah, I love that.
Really, really cool. I originally had that cropped without the crowd, but it almost just looked like a video set. I thought it looked a lot better with the crowd in there.
I agree.
Very, 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 very cool show. And what was, let's say 2002?
Yeah. That was, I think, the last time I saw them. Not because I don't like the band anymore, but I got to a stage where I just burned out on doing arena shows, big hall shows. I don't even like seeing them anymore. So I think the last time I really went to any was probably 2003 when I was reviewing for the Plain Dealer, and they sent me to a lot of them. But I still love their music, but that was the last major tour of theirs that I shot. That was the same tour. Yeah.
Then we go back to the Boy tour, 1981.
That was the Agora, and that was when I first discovered the band. I used to go to the Agora. They had shows every Monday night, and they had all these bands that went on to big things. I mean, they had Boston, they had Bob Seger, they had Talking Heads.
I discovered U2 through the early MTV videos from Boy and from the first album.
But they played the Agora. And
Boy in the second
minute
album.
I saw them, I fell in love with them. And they came back later that year on the October tour. And I had been up in New York for something. And I actually drove back to Cleveland in a blizzard and actually went straight to the club so I could catch the show.
How great at the Agora. That's an awesome shot.
So it was wonderful. That was the War tour. That was Music Hall. That's back in 2002. And that was back on the War tour.
And Whitney
Houston, a brilliant singer who came to a very sad end. And that was when she was very young and just topping the charts. That was at Blossom.
Was that the height of the I'll Always Love You single and all that?
Yeah. When she had all the big hits. And she was fresh-faced, and she was in her early to mid-20s, and she hadn't gotten strung out on drugs yet.
I love these shots, how the light is shining through just part of her hair.
I know.
And it almost gives her like a halo effect. I love that. That just makes those shots so cool. It's just how it outlines her hair. That's just really a cool shot.
Thank you.
And that ends everything off for Classic Superstars. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Again, every photo that you see is for sale, and they're alphabetical order on the webpage, which you can see in the description of this video. You can also find the links at joekleon.com, Kleon, joekleon.com. And photos are printed and shipped by NEO Pro Imaging. You can get them in any size, 8x10, 11x14, 16x20. Other sizes will be available. Just really hope that you'll order some photos. They make great Christmas gifts. Why bother going to the mall with all the mouth breathers and COVID and everything? Stay in the comfort of your own home. Surf through our 1,100 photos. Find some family members who are fans of these bands. Buy some photos. They'll be shipped directly to you. The shipping is great. The print quality is great. And you'll be helping out not only Anastasia and I, but also NEO Pro Imaging. So one order of one photo actually benefits 2 local businesses. So you can't beat that. We will be back tomorrow with Country. And this live stream will also stay online, so if you caught us halfway through, you can go back and watch the whole thing from the beginning, or you could skip around because everything is alphabetical, so if there's artists you're looking for, they should be fairly easy to find. And we will see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock. We'll do it all again with country music. Thanks so much for watching.
Thank you. How long?